Alcoholism and stress, even before you get to the stage of alcoholism, what I would call active addiction, any amount of alcohol can make you feel stressed, especially the next day. It causes huge anxiety, well, it did with me, and a lot of other people I'm speaking to. Because when you start drinking, even just socially, over time it builds up for most people. And if you ask around and look around more, you're more aware of it. Even if you're just a social drinker, you can spot the big drinkers. They're a little bit shaky in the morning, a little bit pale, a bit anxious. They're not running at full speed, that sort of thing. But when I was working full time and I had quite a high pressure job, a lot of us used to drink. I always tell the ones in early turn, we got a bit too much, a bit too red in the face, a little bit too quiet when not chatting on, and didn't eat a big breakfast or sort of just plodded through the day, if that makes sense. It happens in all walks of life, this. And then you move on from social drinking to maybe drinking a bit more heavily, and you've got the stresses of finance come into it, domestic pressures, where your wife wants you to be up early, mowing the lawn and washing the car, the usual domestic stuff that most people fall into. Not everybody does. Some people stay single, some people get married, some people move on. But overall, it causes a lot of stress in life, in marriage, and in families, this sort of thing. And like I said, also financially. As you move on from there, and you're into stage 3, what I would call it, where you're drinking too heavily, and you know it's causing you maybe a few problems, but you just ignore it. That can happen. That can stay for a long period, stage 3, where you're up and down a bit. A few heavy days on the drinking, a little bit less. Imagine to get to work, but you might be juggling annual leave a little bit, maybe trying to do shifts that cater for your drinking needs, that sort of thing. People do this, I've seen it. And you start to avoid social gatherings with families because you want to go to the pub. And your world is revolved around the pub or drinking at some point. And then you start to hide it a little bit. And then that's even more stressful, isn't it? Maybe you have a secret stash in the garage. I was speaking to a chap last night. He's an alcoholic like myself. He's been sober for about 3 years. He was saying that when he was married, he thought he'd disguise the fact he'd been at the pub by nipping into the house a bit early on a few cans and leaving the empty cans on the kitchen sink. But he'd been out drinking from midday. He had quite a flexible job. Now, he said to his ex-wife years later, "Did you notice that I was going to the pub and whatnot?" Of course I knew. As soon as I walked in the door, I knew you had more than 3 cans of beer. Other people will notice you drinking more than you do, because it's a mind-altering drug, isn't it? And you're not as sharp, and you slur your speech, and you get into all sorts of problems. You don't look well, you don't sound well. And the first thing you do is you get in and open a can of beer. On a lot of cases, people drink wine now, don't they? I've never drunk wine, but do you see my point? So as all this stress starts to build up, even if you're just drinking a little bit, really. But when you get further into it, the stresses are more and more pivotal, really, and you don't find that you've got any ambition anymore. All you're looking at is, well, have I got enough stash? Can I manage to get to work tomorrow? Will I get up in time? Massive stresses. It's working and running a house and running a car and having a family, all this sort of thing. That's stress enough, isn't it? You've got stress from your relatives, stress from your children, stress from your wife or your partner or your husband, family members. You've got neighbours who cause problems, people parking with your driveway, all this sort of thing. Everyone's got problems in life, but when you're sober, you can deal with them. When you're drinking, everything becomes a bit more of a problem, especially financial, because if you're drinking regularly, especially today's prices, unless you go to certain companies which have very, very reduced prices, the ones I'm on about, it's a big bill, it's a big dent in your pay packet. I worked out, I think a little while ago, that even a moderate drinker is going to be spending $7.50 a month minimum on just a few pints at the pub. If you factor into that what you're having at home, the home consumption of alcohol market in the UK is over £15 billion that's just drunk at home. Imagine what it is for the whole lot, with pubs and clubs and restaurants and sporting events and all that sort of thing. It's a huge, huge bill. So when you start to get into this From stage 3 to stage 4, when you're in active addiction, you're falling off the cliff, as it were, then you'd be hiding beer all the time. I used to carry it with me in a case when I used to go on holiday and stuff, not just in the UK. I put it in bottles in socks so they wouldn't clank in the case. It was a full-time job. It's hard work, all stress. And people, you get somewhere and the parents would say, have you had a drink? No. They knew I'd had a drink. You can tell when somebody had a drink, can't you? If you're sober, you'll know that somebody's had a drink. And then you get to the point where you're drinking in the morning a little bit. Hair of the dog, just to try and get over it. I remember just waiting to go to social things on the door, and she would pick me up and she'd say, oh, so have you had a drink? And when she met her now long-term partner, she was frightened to introduce me to him, which is disgraceful. I spoke to him at length about this a few months ago, and he said, yeah, I knew you were drinking. I knew you had a problem, but now you're a different man, and I'm getting really well with him. I'm getting well with everybody, because you become very selfish when you drink, and that's part of the stress as well, because if you're quite a giving person, quite a caring person, you don't want to let people down, but you're letting people down all the time. And the person let down first is yourself, because you lose everything. You lose all sense of reality in a way, and all you're concentrating on is alcohol, and that's stressful. And then you've got the stresses when if you do come off the drink, you've got the stress of will I relapse? Again, that's this chap I was speaking to yesterday, over 3 years sober, that he just walked past a pub. I just called it a Dog and Bone, in the local area, and he said it was so inviting, the pub, the Christmas lights on, bit of laughter, bit of music. And relapse is stressful in itself. You know, well, just try one, can I control it? Can I do this? Can I do that? And it's constantly on your mind, alcohol. That's stressful enough. And you got to the point where I was completely addicted, and I didn't know whether I could get the pub. I didn't know if I had enough supply. I was feeling ill. I was too stressed to go to the doctor. I neglected other health issues because I was just constantly on the drink, constantly on trying to have a few drinks to try and make myself feel better. But I never felt better. I always felt slightly worse. Now I'd try and cut down a little bit, which was stressful. Then I'd try and get some medication from the doctor, which was stressful. Then I would have phone calls, missed calls, which is stressful. People would try and come and see me, which is stressful. Things would break down. I had no hot water. I had no heating. I had no plumbing really in the flat in the end because the bathroom floor collapsed. I didn't want to let people into the apartment. I had rats. All of these things build up in the compound because you're not dealing with one thing at a time. You have 50 things to deal with. You just can't deal with it. Things get out of control, and you're spending all your time thinking, where's my next drink? Where's my next drink? Where's my next drink? And when you come off it, we've still got stresses. Everyone's got stresses, but you can deal with them. They don't seem as magnified. And this anxiety carry on, which a lot of people have problems with, it makes the smallest problem absolutely enormous. It'll go from molehill to Everest within seconds. You get to the point where you don't want to open the post. You're getting letters from the bank, you're getting calls from debt companies, all this sort of thing. Some people lose their apartments or their houses. Fortunately, I didn't because I had some income. A lot of people on the streets because of it. I was speaking to a guy in Manchester recently who was homeless. He'd been a top financial advisor, and it crashed. He had the crash, and I can't remember when it was, 2007. He lost a lot through alcohol, and then he started to drink more. He lost everything. Then he drank more and more and more. Now he's on the streets. A very intelligent guy. So all sorts of people hit by alcohol. It doesn't matter how intelligent you are, which school you've been to, how much you earned, where you live, what your personality is like. It'll take anybody. It's just sitting there waiting to take your life in the end. So yeah, the stresses of alcohol. I could go on for hours. I'm not going to do that. It'll bore you to death. If you have any comments, please drop me a line. If you enjoy the channel or you benefit from it, please subscribe. And I'll speak to you all very soon.